my show, When Everyone Wins, where a key goal I have for you is shifting from power over and under to power within and between. I'm your host, Judy Ryan. In each episode, I'll share my knowledge from decades in workplace culture transformation and leadership development as the founder and CEO of LifeWorks Systems. I'll help you build trust and emotional and social intelligence. My show, When Everyone Wins, is about creating a life you love and helping others do the same. Welcome, everybody, to our show today, which is a fantastic topic on intentional, compassionate leaders, are leaders who create win-win organizations. And I'm looking forward to telling you about my guest. But first, I want you to know that empowering leaders, transforming organizations, and inspiring change, that's what is needed for today. Visionary leaders who lead by building healthy connections and providing generous compassion are the most highly influential leaders. They inspire people, they inspire individuals, they inspire teams, and they drive meaningful change. They break through any place where there's complacency. And that's because when we use our intellect alone without input from our hearts and our souls, this often leads to burnout and apathy and fear. Approaching change in our world without heart can be cold, unfeeling, and even brutal. But when change is based in a consciousness of the whole person and includes empathy, compassion, and a commitment to help everyone in a workforce feel connected and that they matter, they fully engage. They feel seen, they feel safe, and they feel strong. That's when people invest themselves in their work, in their teammates, in their leaders, and in the success of the organizations. This is also a time when the world's waking up to the importance of moving from Industry Revolution 4.0, which is a kind of a new term a lot of people haven't heard of, but that is the revolutionary stage where we focused on a technology-based automation and efficiency. And we are now moving to the Industrial Revolution 5.0, where we focus on human-centric collaboration while using that automation. In Industry 5.0, the emphasis is on sustainability, worker well-being, and purpose-driven innovation. While 4.0 brought us artificial intelligence and the Internet of All Things and robotics, 5.0 builds on this by focusing on how to use the technology to complement and support human capabilities, not override them, promote ethical integration, and achieve many greater social goals beyond just productivity. In order for this kind of person to be trained and supported, leaders must understand how to build trust, create psychological safety, inclusive and equitable conditions and conversations, and align with purpose and values-based ways of running organizations. With all of this in mind, let me tell you about my guest today. She's a thought leader committed to create a future within organizations that's characterized by respect, inclusion, and high-impact leadership based in compassion. She's helping develop intentional leaders who embrace compassion and the creation of win-win organizations. I'm happy to tell you about my guest, Dr. Arthi Moore-Roberts. Dr. Arthi Moore-Roberts is a visionary leadership strategist who lives in South Africa. She's the founder and driving force behind Celebrating Humanity International, Key Leadership International, and Key Holdings. She's a globally recognized figure as an international keynote speaker, leadership coach, and diversity and inclusion specialist. Her transformative influence reaches across nations, touching governments, boards, universities, schools, orphanages, and empowerment initiatives for youth and women. With visionary programs implemented in diverse countries, she champions a global movement of compassionate leaders of influence with her work underpinned by her primary value of compassion. She pioneers groundbreaking programs that address diversity, well-being, gender-based violence, eliminating it, workplace bullying, and youth leadership for corporate transformation, while also sitting on boards internationally to address that fifth industrial revolution. and women in the built environment. Welcome to the show, Arthi.
Thank you so much, Judy. It's such a pleasure to be on your platform, and I'm so excited about the flow of this conversation and the intention that you've got behind it. It's going to be exciting and it's going to be vibrant. So thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Oh, I'm just so excited. I felt like I wanted to go on and on about you, Arthi. You are an amazing person. I wanted to ask you, I was reading some of the things that you've been writing, and you had written that there's an increased need of the leaders at the C-suite to have upgraded leadership skills and to really to challenge their mindsets and beliefs and to pour compassion intentionally into their own personal evolution. Can you tell our audience why and how you see that this increase in intentionality and compassion is needed, and what are the complacent mindsets and beliefs, and how do you personally help them pour this compassion intentionally into their own personal evolution?
Well, that's a beautiful question, and I love it because that is something that I'm so passionate about. With leadership at the moment, we've only delved into the Western concepts of leadership. So it's motivational, it's inspirational, it's everything which is the rah rah, you can achieve, it's KPIs, it's what can you do to achieve goals. So it's very intentional in terms of creating a bottom line impact. And somewhere along the line, we missed out the human being impact. So where you've got leaders who understand how to run the processes, they forgot how to include the human being in those processes. So how to encourage people, how to develop them, how to uplift them, how to understand them is the more powerful part of it. And what I found with compassion leaders of influence, and the reason that I focus on that is because compassion is a behavior that can be instilled and it can be learned in the same way that leadership can be developed and it can be encompassed in different areas. I find that bringing in compassion very different to empathy, because empathy is the feeling that we have, the emotional feeling we've got towards our fellow human beings, regardless of whether we understand the journey or not. Compassion is the behavior we use to instill within our thoughts and actions to help and guide them to the next steps or the levels for their achievement, for their success. And one of the things that I found with leaders is that it's not a skill that is taught. It's not encouraged, and it's not something that they're even aware of that should be instilled in leadership. So when we talk about empathetic leadership or compassionate leadership, they always ask, why should I like everybody? And I think that as a leader, you don't have to like the people that you're engaged with, but you can understand what they bring to the table in terms of their skills, their ability, their experience, their diverse knowledge and wisdom. And then when you create policies, procedures, and systems, it's integrating the wealth of knowledge and what they bring to the table and putting that into the business environment. So then that is what creates the welcoming environment. And when we look at leadership development, the complacency part is saying that I am a leader, which means that based on my title, you should respect me and you should follow me. There I find the biggest thing that I find is the disconnect is they feel entitled to have people follow them. So your title demands that you are now entitled to other people following without questioning and not being able to have a voice. And this is why we look at where does compassion flow into these conversations? And when we talk about vulnerability and we talk about how to be open-minded and have an open door policy, it's the welcoming environment you create as a leader, but those are skills that can be taught.
You have said so many important things in there. A couple of them that I just want to ping on a little bit are that people are not taught these skills. They think they're supposed to already have them. Also, this idea that I'm entitled is kind of a place of invulnerability, which, when we switch to compassion, creates a need to be more vulnerable. And I remember hearing that the word compassion is being with, which is the calm part, passion, the emotion or the feeling of others. We don't have to like people to be able to see them, hear them, and be with them in expressing who they are and their ideas and all of that. And that creates that mutual
Mm.
respect and care. I don't know if you see this in the people that you're working with at the higher levels, those entitled kind of leaders. Not all of them feel that way, but some of them kind of hide behind that entitlement of their title. Um, where they are so resistant. Can you talk any about like what you see and what happens to them when they get away from that resistance and they begin to trust kind of a sense of shared power and equality with the people that they're leading?
I love what you've just said. Shared power and equality. Now that makes so much sense because what you're doing is you're bringing people back onto the level of equality based on our interaction, which means that you do not have to have a title. You do not have to look like me, speak like me, or articulate yourself like me in terms of educational level. But I can connect with you as a human being. And I've worked with with boards of directors and management teams. And I've come across some CEOs who resist change, who bring me in and say to me, you need to make them respect me. They need to listen to us. They need to follow our company values. And I just say, I'm sorry, I'm not the right person for you. I will work with you if you are willing to be open-minded and curious about how we can transform your mindset first, remove your blind spots so that you can actually see the value of your people. And then it becomes a very different connection and engagement. And with a lot of these CEOs, I personally coach them on a leadership program that I've got. It's called an accelerator program. And within the first few sessions, they're able to actually remove their unconscious biases, which could be related to their own thinking, upbringing, their programming. It is what they were taught, and all they're doing is just projecting it on people. So I coined that term projectile dysfunction.
I love that.
I have a lot of fun with it. And, for a lot of them, I use this term a lot, right? They glitch. They like, their brain glitches, literally. And they ask me, what do you mean by that? So the reality of it is that the way we treat other people is the way that we feel about ourselves in a lot of cases. So
Yeah.
we will project our fears and our hurts and our traumas on other people because that is what we learned, our protection mechanism, the way we feel that we've got to actually have power over people. And I know you're going to love that because it's all about the power within
Yes.
people that can be brought out and nurtured. So with these CEOs, I use the accelerator program with different healing techniques in coaching. And when we remove their emotional disconnect that they had within themselves, they then realized that the way they were interacting with people was a reflection of their own fears and biases. And so a lot of them take that deep-seated journey to be able to look at themselves first, because you cannot lead people unless you know where you're heading, because they're following you. Some of them are following you blindly. Some
Mm.
of them are following you intentionally out of respect, but it's going to be based on your mindset as a CEO. And a lot of them embraced it. They challenged the environment. They changed their policies. They embraced people. They improved their ability to increase equity for people who deserved it, and they increased their training programs for those who lacked it. They opened up their budgets for resources and upgraded the environments. So for me, it was powerful in terms of transformation of the leadership mindset in order to transform the organization.
I love how you think. I feel very kindred with you, Arthi, and I think it's a vision that is starting to grow in, when people hear it, they start to recognize the joy of it. You said a couple of words that are sticking with me. One is curiosity. And I don't think you can have compassion without curiosity about how do I think, and is it all accurate, and is it all useful, and is it all helpful? You also talked about being able to, oh gosh, now I'm losing the word, curiosity, and you talked about healing. You used the word healing. a lot of this is about healing our own past. I know the model that I use is very similar to yours because of the things I've read about and heard about, and even today. And it's based on how we've been conditioned to have limiting beliefs about ourselves, fearful beliefs about ourselves. And that's why it's so difficult for those leaders to let go because they have a little bit of healing to do right away, in order to be one with and build equity with the people that
Mhm.
they're leading. And I think a lot of leaders may fear a loss of status if they share power as opposed to powering over people. They don't know how to actually believe in the value of that. So you said that you've actually seen when the leaders do that and what comes of it. Are there any particular stories that you want to share about the acceleration program and some of the transformations you've had, or?
Oh, absolutely. I was working with an entire pharmaceutical company, and we rolled out our values-based leadership program. But what I found is that there was a disconnect at the board level. So there was a disconnect amongst the directors, and the board members clashed with each other. And one of the things that we found is that they were not open to each other. They had unconscious biases, and I mean, the comments that they had about each other was really, really nasty. So it was a toxic environment at the top, and they could not understand why everybody in the departments were reacting. Now, the whole thing about reacting, responding is that people will then work on the energy that you put out. So
Yeah.
if you, as a leader, actually in a toxic environment that you created, you will need to uncreate that. And we always talk about what have you learned that you need to unlearn and then relearn.
Yes.
And so it's learned behavior. So in the accelerator program, I'll only do this in 8 sessions because I don't want to actually live in the person's life forever. I believe that the 8 sessions are more than enough to cement a different way of thinking. It's about realigning our conscious belief systems by removing whatever is stored in our unconscious biases, in our unconscious part of our mindsets. And by using the different healing techniques, I took the CEO of this company as well as their team through these programs directly one on one whilst we ran the values based leadership program. So I need to actually say this. One of the directors wanted to move because there was no opportunity for growth, and he became the GM and country manager of another massive company through these programs that I ran. There were quite a number of the other people I interacted with created NGOs for massive impact in underprivileged areas. And so the growth actually shifted there. The company shifted to actually see who the toxic people were. It actually became transparent. The transparency allowed them to make more informed decisions, but who needed to be removed from the environment after they had been given the skill to adapt, to change, and to evolve. And when they did not want to, we then realized that they were the type of people that were not open to change and not ready for it. But we did not have to hold on to them to actually stop the growth of people. So when we look at obstacles in life, we should not be afraid to remove the people in our lives that bring that negative energy. Once you have given them the guidance, the support, the love, the care, the compassion, access to resources, everything that should help them to grow in their EQ. And if they choose not to grow with an organization, they are welcome to actually leave. But we found that only one out of a few thousand would leave. The rest would transform. So
I love what you say about making sure that they've had every opportunity before they're let go. Because my favorite thing to hear is, wow, I never thought that person would ever change. And when you talk about the board being at each other, I mean, that's a great example, or toxic culture. That's a great example of imbalances in power, where power over and power under are occurring instead of power within and power, and I like power between also, and power for one another. Because then you've got a compassionate, I'm with you on my team as the board, and I'm also with you as the members of the company. And it reminded me of when I was reading about your specialization in DEIB. And I know what the B stands for, but I wanted to talk about this because it reminds me of what will take people out of toxicity. What will take them out of use of power that is not equitable? And it's really focusing on how do we all feel when we are appreciated for our diversity, we're given opportunities to be equitable and to demonstrate equity and to experience it, to be included, and also to have a real sense of belonging, which is what that B stands for. And that's where it's all about the sense of connection, the psychological safety, the acceptance, the certainty that every employee will feel understood, valued, and like they're indispensable to the team. And so this is really a big part of my work as well, because it is based on understanding what causes people to go into what Adler called the inferiority complex and those limiting and fearful beliefs that people have about themselves. So belonging is so important. I'm so glad that it is now part of DEI-B. And I would love for you to talk about your specialization around in particular that B. And also, do you catch the flack that we're catching in the United States right now as if there's something wrong with the words diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Actually, we've increased our laws and policies to be more open, and it's compulsory in our country to include DIB for every organization, whether it's government, parastatals, or even if it's in schools or corporate or private sector. So it's one of the things that is compulsory for people to invest in. And it's the only way we're going to bring in equity for the people who were not given equity because of past histories. It's the only way we can actually realign our historical injustices in this country. So I've seen what is going on in America, and it actually hurts me to see the disconnect. It's actually sad, and it really is. I have no words for it, right? But
No,
what I talk into is that it's not acceptable.
no.
And that the one word I would use. It's not acceptable that we can actually say that we need to go back to old school thinking. That's the simplicity of it. Now, the old school thinking is the reason why we've got DEIB and why we have got inclusion on a different level, why we're talking about women empowerment, why we're talking about inclusivity on all levels. It's that there was a disconnect in our entire world. And our histories show that. What we need to do right now currently is look at raising our awareness on what did history refuse to allow us to do, to grow, to be, to have, the resources we could have access to. That is what DIB is talking into. And with that disconnect of separating people, because that is what it boils down to. People were separated into environments where you had privileged, not so privileged, people who felt the need to bully and harass based on superiority complexes, and that is why inferiority complex is so huge in a lot of cultures. And so we've got to look at reality here. I mean, in our country, where we are, what we're doing differently is we're actually including people on different level of belonging, so that when they walk into a room, they don't feel different to what we dumb them down to, the color of their skin, their language, their age, their culture, their gender. Belonging means that when I walk into the room, you see me as a human being. And that when I walk in, I do not have to apologize for breathing for who I am. It
Yeah.
means that when I walk into the room, I feel comfortable to ask, may I take a seat? Can I offer you something to eat or drink? And you're part of that conversation. Unapologetically should be the word attached to belonging. We stop apologizing for what history has demeaned us to or segregated us into in terms of all of the different areas. So, I mean, in our country, we were segregated into race groups. And so when people interact with each other, it's always the prejudgment and unconscious biases that walk before us. We will say, oh, it's a person of this language, this gender, and this culture that's walking into the room. We could say, well, this is a person of this religious belief, and there were all of these underlying issues that we were taught and programmed to. And so where I find that when I implement the Celebrating Humanity experience, It's in the words. We celebrate the humanness of the person. The human being walking through the door is then welcomed openly to, to be allowed to speak without fear of repercussion. And when we look at how psychological safety now builds into this, we then understand the DEI means diversity gives us an understanding of where people are at. When we look at equity, it's about making people have, allowing people to have access to resources, to things that they never had access to, positions, and the ability to grow. When we look at inclusion, we want them to feel like they are a part of a team, but belonging is getting them to the point where they are so comfortable, they do not see any of these issues, and that they can speak openly without fear of repercussion. The fear is what gets removed in order for somebody to feel like they belong. And
I
when you
love,
look at belonging,
I love that distinction between belonging and what was the other word you used? I don't know why it's flew out of my head. The difference between belonging versus inclusion.
inclusion, yes.
Because belonging is that feeling of, it's almost, when it's done well, it is authenticity.
Yes.
And it reminds me of a story, which you're talking about in your country in particular, in South Africa especially. I was at a really cool meeting this weekend called the Interfaith Partnership. It's like 35 different religions that all come together and share faith and how it fits with what's going on in the world and everything. And I learned that the Catholic religion, the new Pope, is asking all the bishops to do a shared power conversation with people at all levels within the community, including the lay people, all in the same room in small groups. That's what we do in our work. I think that's what you do in your work. And a lot of the bishops in the United States, not a lot of them, but a certain amount of them, are resisting it. They're almost being forced to do it because they've been resistant to it, because that idea of joining with people as though we're all equals as human beings was confronting to them. And I believe it's partly because win-win is really trying to get birthed, and win-lose is fighting to hang on with a death grip. And a lot of it's tied to the faith communities and patriarchy in general. But I heard that the South African bishops are not resisting. They're the ones that are doing what's asked of them. And I just thought, wow, that is so cool that here I hear that. And I knew I was going to be talking to you today. But when you talked also about superior and inferior, that reminds me of the movie Origin, and I don't know if you saw that, but it's really about we can use anything to do inferior, superior. We can use race, we can use age, we can use religion, we can use so many different things just to choose to make somebody inferior to us so we can justify dehumanizing them.
Exactly. I mean, and that actually reminds me beautifully of a saying that I heard by Eleanor Roosevelt. That was something I heard when I was 18, and it stuck in me. It was, she said, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent.
Yes,
That stuck with me,
yes.
which meant that it did not matter who I was or where I came from. My circumstances and the environment I grew up did not define who I was and what I was able to achieve, to be, to have, how I could grow. And so that one simple sentence removed for me that nobody can make me feel bad enough, not good enough. They could not body shame me. They could not pick on where I came from, my language, my height. It did not matter. Nobody could make me feel inferior unless I allowed them into my mindset. And so that strengthened my mindset. And that actually is perfectly talking into belonging as a barometer. I read that somewhere. That belonging is the barometer to know that you have achieved beautifully the DEI side. And that is where you can actually now see that people really feel at home with who they are. And so when you're sitting in a room, they're bringing the brilliance and the beauty of who they are to the table. And if we can create that environment, that means that we've removed that whole inferiority complex, that fear-based engagement, the unconscious biases, the thinking that people are, they walk in when there's no belonging. People walk in anticipating feeling rejected before they've even done anything, before anybody has said anything. And so it could take a nuance of your body language, your eye contact, something that you said, it's in your tone, and immediately people take that as an affront. So I realized that belonging is going way more deeper, and it is such a beautiful conversation to have.
You know, what's interesting about what you're saying, I think that belonging has that same feeling tone to it that emotions have. And a lot of people are so uncomfortable with their emotions.
Mhm.
And I remember when I very first started my company almost 24 years ago, and I would tell marketing people, well, I want to be branded around my purpose statement, which is to create a world in which all people love their lives. And they would almost like insult me, like, oh, that's just too naive and idealistic. And
Aw.
most leaders don't really care if their people love their lives, you know? And I remember even wanting to question myself, you know, like, well, am I too loosey goosey or something? And then I realized, no, I am inspired to help people love their lives. And if that's what drives me, I've got to believe that's within most, if not every good person in the world. And maybe even those bad people in the world who have forgotten who they are at their best. And so what I decided was, you know what? I want to only work with the people who do love their lives and want their people to love their lives. And I know that number is growing for both of
Mm.
us. But you also talked about feeling guarded. I remember a story where this man came to my house and he was meeting 50 people for the first time. He was a weekend instructor and he walked in and shook everybody's hands and then he got up at the front of the room and every single person in the room, he named them by name during his talk. And I was just blown away. And I asked him, I said, do you have some kind of like memory trick or something? And he said, no. He said, what I do is before I come into any group, if I have any tension in my body, I look at and ask myself, where am I afraid they're going to judge me? And whatever
Mm.
that he hears, he gives himself the love and the reassurance, and I've got your back no matter what they do. And so he overcomes with compassion the parts of himself that would put up protection. And he said, the reason I can remember people's names, and I've never forgotten this, is because when we shake hands with somebody, and then we're on the third handshake in the same group, and we're like, what was her name? She just told me her name. How come I can't remember her name? It's because we're in that fear state that is protected, and we can't even see or hear who the person is. That's just mind blowing.
It is. And you know, when you think about that, that is a person who is now resonating at a very different level of awareness, a different sense of self, of healing himself, of being, getting to the point where he reflects with love on what was his triggers and he heals himself with the affirmations. He affirms after embracing. I'm
Yeah.
not feeling so good, but where's this feeling coming from? What do I need to do? And that's the healing triggers that we need to actually showcase to people who are leaders. That's the compassion, the self compassion that leaders deserve as well. Because one of the other areas, the imbalance that we've got, is that a lot of people don't realize that leaders themselves are human beings. They too have gone through a lot in their lives and they've achieved a lot to get to that level. And maybe sometimes, and this is the part that actually appeals to me, it is the hardest leader that I want to work with. The person who hates the most, who is the most resistant to change, is the most open to change. For me, coming into that environment, I'm able to actually sense where the energy is, where the disconnect is, and why they feel that way. We get to the why, we get to the cause, we eliminate the cause, and then the symptoms of bad leadership gets removed. So when you see in an environment where leadership is really toxic, or it is demanding, or it is a bullying or harassment kind of leadership environment or traits, those are symptoms. I want to know what caused that. And as I deal with the human being, I want to understand and go deep into their psyche of their human experience. And as I get to evolve them in that journey, they're able to actually realign it, they're able to heal it, and then move forward with skills that cements it and sustains that change. So, one of the things that is powerful is the sustainability of the person being able to transition rather than transform. So they are transitioning from where they were at in their belief system into a different way of seeing themselves. So the self-awareness, the complexes get removed, but then it sustains itself in the same way that you're talking about the guy that walked in. He, in the simple gesture of shaking people's hands, he actually chose to be intentional in creating a human connection. That is compassion on a very different level. And when you're coming in with that mindset, with that intentionality of connection, then everything flows. And you'll also notice that even the fears flow away. And there always seems to be that whole thing of rejection. I do not want to feel rejected, but where did it come from in your life? You remove that storyline, you remove that trigger, and suddenly you walk into a room purposeful, and your presence is resonating at a very different level, and so is your energy. So when you walk in, your energy speaks volumes about who you are. And that is the change that a lot of leaders are seeking when they want to become people of influence and impact.
Yeah. And what's interesting is this person was a new trainer, but he was so intentional that it was one of the most profound deep dive weekends. And I had been involved for years in this program where we would have almost monthly deep dive training weekends. And so, even to this day, to be able to tell this story now, that's how an influential leader, as imperfect as influential leaders and all people are, can make a tremendous difference in the lives of others. And what's interesting about what you said about is a lot of times we're so hard on the leaders because they're the ones that hold the power, and people have fear toward the leader, but they don't realize the leader has fear about them
Yeah.
leaving them, about them rejecting them, about failing them. And so what we do is we say, instead of saying, why is this happening in a certain way? And who's to blame? That's the
Mhm.
big one. Instead of saying who's to blame and why, the question should be what system, if it were put in place, would fix or resolve this problem. And that's kind of
Mhm.
what you're saying when you say that we bring in a solution that is around changing from a transition from the
Mhm.
old to the new. So I think that transition, you have to have a higher vision and purpose and values in order to have that transition and see that it's worth it. So,
I love that.
well,
Just something you said really made sense now. When you're saying that people are afraid of power, the power that a leader has. And for me, immediately the word empowered came up. And as you're talking, I just thought, the way that powerful leaders can engage with their people differently to remove that fear of power is we always say good leaders empower their people. But the EM could be, how can I, as a person, embrace being powerful within myself so that I'm not afraid of the power that a leader would hold based on the title?
Well, I would even take it a step further. If you can help a leader allow someone else to empower them who
Yeah.
may be considered lesser, because that's what happens when they mix in these groups, because we purposely put uh, maybe a first line receptionist that was only 19 years old with the CEO when they're doing their mentoring back and forth. And the mentoring is not counsel like a traditional mentoring. It's one where you can ask questions to respect the wisdom in the other person and draw it out from them, and then ask questions that allow them to put it into motion. And anyone can do that when it's kind of a scripted way that they can remember how to do that. And what it does is it creates the experience of, wow, I'm 19 and I can influence the CEO, and it's real. And that same CEO gets the opportunity to return the favor. So there's no lost status. But until they have that experience, it just doesn't happen. But when you were talking about leadership that is that way, it reminded me of a story that I read about you about when you were just a young person, which makes me wonder who influenced you. Because even though you described yourself as kind of idealistic and naive and timid, you went on a road trip for the first time pretty far away, and you met the author and motivational speaker Jim Rohn. And you were so affected by him, you broke the rules and ran up on the stage, even though you probably weren't supposed to. Um, I just thought that was so powerful because just like the guy I just talked about, Jim Rohn for you was one of those people that helped you be unapologetically purpose driven.
I love that because it ties in so beautifully to what you were saying about a CEO and a young person. And to be in the presence of somebody with so much value and experience. I never understood what motivational speaking was. I'd never read a motivational book. We never had access to any of this. I'd never heard of podcasts or YouTube videos or even attended a networking session. I mean, I was 18, fresh out of college. And when I heard about Jim Rohn being a speaker, people just kept talking about him with such reverence. And I couldn't understand why people were putting him on such a pedestal. So that intrigued me. And so I worked out how to get to this event. And, being from a very, very, very closed, very, very, it's a community that holds you tight. It's a very close-knit community. You do not leave to go anywhere. You do not even go 10 kilometers from your house without everybody going with you. So when I say that I had to come out of my shell in so many ways, I had to develop courage to even ask my mother if I could even go on this trip. And it was weeks of begging before she even said, yes, I can. But the thing that stood out for me is the reverence in the way they spoke about him. And something about that actually made sense to me. And I wondered, how can I be in that position of influence? And when I got there and listened to him speak about being kind and gracious, and the gentleness in the way he spoke, it just filled my soul on a very deep level. I became hooked on every word that he said, and I could not stop listening to him. So when he finished speaking, something in my head said, you need to know this person, you need a photograph of this person. And they had announced that no one is allowed to take photographs during the event or even after, unless you had paid for VIP status to get into the room with him for a photo. Now, I didn't understand all of these nuances, and I think being gullible and naive actually helped me in that situation. I did not know the rules. It's like, the bumblebee flies because nobody told it couldn't. So I ran up with my camera. I shoved into somebody's hand and I said, take the photo, take the photo. I jumped onto stage with him. I grabbed him and I just said, smile. And he did. They clicked the photo. I just saw a lot of people running at me. There were bodyguards running at me and security guards saying, you're not allowed, and give me the camera. I ran with the camera. I was not giving it back because something within me actually spoke to me and said, this was a moment that will never be forgotten.
Yes.
And for me, the humility in that moment, the fact that him being such an incredible man, such a man of wisdom, and so world renowned, and I just said, smile, and he did. For me, that was
Yes.
fascinating. And when I walked away, I bought as many books and I started listening to his words of wisdom to fill me on a different level. And then I realized all the things I'd never known, all the things I'd never had access to, and it awakened with me the curiosity to grow and to actually pursue more of this in line with motivation and inspiration, how I can change my life from the environment I was in of a close-knit community to becoming a person who traveled around the world and then curious about other cultures. So,
Yes.
I mean, that was a massive thing for me.
I loved when I read that and I even saw the picture because I think of a person that has moved completely away from a toxic use of power, like Jim Rohn. They are not just motivational speakers. They are inspirational. And the reason I see that as a little different is when you are affected in your entire spirit, it's almost like a vibe runs through your whole body. At least that's the way I experience. It's like shivers, and I can't even pull my attention away for anything else.
Yeah.
And that's why when you were affected, it moved you. It moved you in your life, it moved you in your work, it helped you set your own memory of, I feel the most expanded in this. My soul feels expanded. And one of the things that I don't talk about a lot, but I have this vision when I was young, and I was on the stage and I was holding hands with this line of people, and our shoulders were touching, and I could feel that same feeling of vibration going through the whole line. And out in front of us were just millions of people, just faceless crowds. And I do think that a lot of people like Jim Rohn, like you, Arthi, are coming together to bring a renaissance in humanity at this time. And we can't stop it being just motivational. We have to be inspirational. And I know we're getting close to where we're going to be wrapping up in a little bit, but I want to make sure I touch on something that is really important to a lot of people right now that I think you have this unique qualification for. You are a board member of the Society for Automation, Instrumentation, Mechatronics, and Computer Engineering, the SAIMC. That's a mouthful. That's the intellect in you, Arthi, the incredible intelligence in you. You've been a frontline champion in that fourth industrial revolution, or 4IR, and you're clearly a really strong intellect in that evolution. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is for people to really understand the importance of marrying all of this technological with our hearts and with our humanity?
Oh, absolutely. When I look at, 4IR was all about automation and technology. It was all brought in to actually advance us as human beings. But where 5IR comes in is to focus on the human-centric side. It's about the people-centric ability to lead ourselves whilst we use technology and automation. So if we're looking at a quality of a life and a lifestyle where automation adds to that lifestyle, we must look at developing our understanding of being human and what it means, and to actually embrace it on a very different level. It doesn't mean that it's going to take over the world. It means that our world will change so that we use it to embrace it in a different way and form to create a different type of engagement. And when we look at the quality of our lifestyles, we're actually using upgraded machines. Our microwaves are changing. The way we bake, the way we cook. I mean, we use a lot of different technologies to enhance the experience of what we develop or create. It makes us happier. It creates a different way of, bringing in that joy and the way we share it with people. Where I've seen the disconnect is that in our need to create this automation and technology in the forefront, we forgot about the sustainability side, the impact on our Earth, on our beautiful planet Earth and Mother Nature. We have forgotten about, with progress, we also need to embrace more equity and then focus on the societal well-being whilst technology is progressing. So when we look at it from those points of view, we need to also understand that we've got to shift that whole ideology from technocentric to human-centric. So that's where the 5IR is coming into place. So we got to put the human being in the forefront and make sure that we understand that those things are an attachment to us. The balance is what we're missing at the moment. So technology is meant to actually improve all of these repetitive tasks that we do. It's data analysis, it's all of the automation of factories. It's supposed to improve the way we do have what we can, what we can create. But then we need the human skills alongside it, because we need their creativity. We need empathy and compassion to actually direct and manage these technologies. People are managing technologies. Technology is not, it's not managing us. And so when we look at all these areas, when we look at environmental impact, we've got to take all of that into account on the 5IR side. Hence why we're looking at the SDGs, and we're looking at how can we improve the quality of the life for women empowerment, youth development, education, planet, people, all of the areas that 5IR is meant to actually improve and actually drive this whole connection. So we have a digital divide. And so what we've got to do is reskill people on that side. So 5IR is reskilling people's thinking around those areas. So when we look at 4IR, it enhances human capabilities, doesn't take away from it. It's meant to augment our human skills, doesn't take away from us being human beings. It's meant to improve productivity, but it doesn't take away the human being's creativity in creating innovation and innovative solutions. Our brains create strategy. We create meaningful engagement for ourselves. Technology doesn't do that. So when we're looking at this whole conversation, we need to learn how to balance this whole environment with compassion for human being first, and technology is part of our journey. It is not the journey. When you look at the way that vehicles grew and evolved, we embraced it. Some people rejected it, but now they revere it because then it made travel possible to further distances. It gave us, with technology and with emails, with internet, with WhatsApp, digital transformation allowed us to connect with people on different levels, different countries, without us having to physically fly there. So
But
when we see that,
you know what? If I could just interrupt for a second, Arthi, I think one of the things that I see with people and technology is just like I see with people in the United States, where they think that they're being replaced. And
mm,
any tool can be used for good or evil. Any technology can be used for good or evil.
yes,
But the human mind is the most dangerous tool because we either believe in abundance or we believe in scarcity. We either believe that it's a zero-sum game and win-lose, or we believe in equity for all and win-win. So I know we're getting close to the end here. I want to ask you, in light of this shift, this transition, even within technology and compassion, and where the world of work is even going, what, first of all, I want to ask you, what are some words of wisdom you'd like to leave with our audience? But I'd also like you to answer how people can get in touch with you. And I want to ask you to share anything with our audience that you want to share with them about your book or your work or any events that you have coming up.
thank you so much for that. That's very generous of you. And they can connect with me on www.kileadership.com, even though it's pronounced as key. It's keyleadership.com. I also have got the value of compassion as well as the videos for it that your audience are welcome to have as a gift from my side. The book has not been published yet, but I do keynote talks around the world based on it, and everything that comes with it. We have the Celebrating Humanity programs and experiences currently that's running for a lot of companies that are looking to diversify and to improve the people engagement. We have values-based leadership programs that we run worldwide, and that is hybrid programs. And my final thing that I think that I would love to share with our audience, it's a saying that I created a long time ago. It is, give yourself full permission that you do not have to like every single person you meet. However, your ability to show respect and be respectful is a direct reflection of your character and dignity as a human being.
Yes. Yes. And that you don't even need everybody's love, approval, and acceptance like you think you need. You need to love, approve, and accept of yourself. And you will attract the people that are going to value you. I really have enjoyed getting to know you in preparing for this event, in really thinking through all of what you're doing and how important it is, and the fact that you are also finding ways to scale this work globally. I also love it that you said, I don't want to be somebody that people are dependent upon forever. I want to skill people so that they're self-reliant and capable and feel that confidence. There's a proverb that one of my people talks about, and it's, I don't remember what country, but it was something to the effect of, when you're a good leader, you create other leaders who think
Mm.
that they came up with the ideas and strategies and changes all by themselves. And that's what I see in your work. You are not only seeking the short-term win-win, you are seeking the long-term win-win. You are come with people with passion, with that sense of I'm here with you. I may not always like you, you may not always like me, but I want you to feel seen, heard, and that you matter, no matter how we think, that you make the person's worth more important than their belief system.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anything else that you want to leave before we go, or does this feel like a good stop?
I think there's one thing that I'd love to share is that as you become a person of, a compassion leader of influence, you realize that you are worth so much, that you're valuable, invaluable, and that as you walk this earth, feel free to share your compassion, your thoughtfulness, and your kindness, and let everything flow with grace through you into the lives of people. And with that, I just believe that every single human being is loved and lovable. And as long as we embrace that, we belong regardless of what other people say.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being you and for all that you're doing, Arthi. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You've been listening to When Everyone Wins, where we're shifting power over and under to power within and between. I'm Judy Ryan, your transformation talk radio host. Tune in each second and fourth Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific time to learn new concepts and tools and listen to conversations I have with thought leaders and change agents. You'll also see real-world applications of what I'm covering so that you experience the power of the concepts and tools I share. In each episode, I bring you my knowledge from decades in workplace culture transformation and leadership development as the founder and CEO of LifeWorks Systems. I invite you to call in with your unique stories and questions. The path to ensure that everyone wins depends on our ability as people to create a life we love and help others do the same. For more information, visit lifeworksystems.com.